In today's chapter, we're going to explore the exercise of fantasy. You might better call that reliving or remembering. It comes from a Greek word called anamnesis, which literally means calling to mind. We remember a past event and we apply it to our daily lives using rational thought and truthful awareness. It's a way of reconstructing a past event. It's not just remembering, that's in the head. We're actually reliving a past experience. It's a type of sense memory in which we recall so vividly and clearly that we actually recreate the emotional and sensory stimuli from that past event. A great example of this would be when Christ broke bread in Emmaus with the two disciples. Now you got to remember, those two disciples had traveled with him all day and they didn't recognize him as the risen Lord. It wasn't until that evening when Christ said, "Remember me." Now the disciples didn't just reminisce or remember. Those words, "remember me," triggered in them a very clear and vivid calling to mind of a past event. And their eyes were opened and they suddenly realized who they were sitting with. Now you might ask, why should we practice the exercise of fantasy, of recreating, of reliving? And the answer is it gives us a kind of psychological power which will provide us with a source of wellness, creativity, and refreshment. Now, before we begin this exercise, it's very important, as always, to remember that we have to enter a state of calmness. Well, we know how to do that. With our previous exercises in contemplative silence and mindfulness, we can draw on posture, sensations, sounds, and breathing. Spend 5 or 6 minutes reaching a state of calmness. Then we're ready to explore an exercise in fantasy. But I caution you, make sure as you're remembering or reliving that you don't daydream. We are remembering something and reliving it, but we are not daydreaming. Maintain your awareness because it will give you the capacity to turn fantasy on and off, to differentiate between real reality, the here and now, and fantasy reality, the event we're recalling. All right, now here's our chance to explore our first exercise in fantasy. Before we begin the fantasy, remember we need to reach a place of calmness. So let's choose the posture exercise, the one in which we sit straight in our chair. Our hips and the weight of our hips is placed equally on both sides, a nice horizontal plane. Our spine is perfectly vertical, not forward, not back, perfectly poised. I'm going to close my eyes because it helps me with this. My shoulders are back and open. My hands are not on my knees, but drawn in towards my torso. That helps me to open my shoulders. The cervical area of my neck is straight, not cockeyed to one side. My head is poised perfectly on top of my shoulders. No weight. My head has no weight. And as I align my posture, I'm aware of the sensations of my legs against the chair, my feet on the floor, the pressure of my hands on my legs, on my hips, and I'm reaching a state of calmness. Now, we can relive a past event. Let's choose one of happiness, an event that brought us great pleasure. It might be a beach, an oceanside. If that's the place, try to recall all of the wonderful senses that existed in that past reality. Relive them. What did the sand feel like on my feet? What did the waves sound like hitting the shore? Was it a gentle lapping or was it a crushing wave? What did the wind feel like on my face, in my hair? Was it a gentle wind? Was it a strong wind? What were the sounds? Were there seagulls? Were there people? Were people speaking to me? What was the sun like? Was it hot or was it cool? Gather as much sensorial information that you can and relive it. Feel it. Experience it. Let it wash over you. Maintain your awareness. Don't daydream. We're in a very specific place, gathering as much information as we possibly can. And then, after a few minutes, gently return to the now. Here I am. Gather as much information about this that I can. How do I feel in this place? Is it calm? Am I stressed? Am I hot, warm? Am I agitated? What's this reality like? Then, gently return to the past reality. Compare the two. Does one affect the other? Does the past affect the present? Does the reality in the present affect the past? What feelings are invoked as I go back and forth from the fantasy reality to the present? And as you do that several times calmly, without daydreaming, you may find that one reality informs the other. And in that process, you might also find a sense of refreshment, a sense of wellness, a sense of, my life is actually just fine. Okay, for the second exercise, this is for those people, including myself actually, who say, I don't have the capacity to fantasize or remember like that. I just don't have the ability to indulge in that type of exercise. Well, I used to believe that as well, until I practiced a form of fantasy. And a way of doing that is to take an object, doesn't matter what it is, any object, and study it for a while and gain as many details that you can from that object. So the object I'm going to use today is this wonderful Norman Rockwell painting called The Runaway. And what we're going to do is study the painting, the image. What do we see? Well, the obvious things will probably be like myself and everyone else that I've done this with. I see a boy sitting on a stool. I see a policeman. And I see a store clerk. Those are the obvious ones. It's called The Runaway. I suppose that boy is running away. He's met a policeman and they've gone to a soda fountain. Pick up as many details as you possibly can with this image. Then I'm going to put it away and ask you to recall all of those details. Well, I already mentioned the obvious ones, but did anybody see the radio in the background? Did you pick up on the fact that there was a coffee machine over to the right? Did anybody see the knapsack on the floor that the boy was using to run away with? Did you see what was on the policeman? Was he wearing a hat or not? Was he carrying anything? I think there was a gun there. There was also a ticket pamphlet in his back pocket. Let's take another look. As you study it, glean as many details as you possibly can. Become like a detective. Pick up on every little detail you can. This time I'm going to remove it. And some people may say, oh, I noticed that the boy's shoelace was untied. I remember those kinds of stools. I've sat on them. They swivel. They turn. They don't have any back. I remember the menu background that was put on a chalkboard with white chalk. And as you remember all of these details, as you're fantasizing, because that's what you're doing, you may even pick up on sensations. You may actually imagine the sounds that are produced in this soda fountain shop. You may actually pick up on smells from a soda fountain. You may actually pick up on the mood that exists in this type of soda fountain. And what you are doing is you're recreating a past reality. You are now engaged in the exercise of fantasy. You have the ability to do this. In this third exercise, we call it, where your treasure is, there is your heart. And in this exercise, I want you to go to a place of complete love and goodness, a place where you felt completely loved, supported, heard, compassion. Go back to that place. Go back to that place of complete forgiveness, acceptance, and love. Embrace it, feel it, enjoy it. And when that other voice comes up, that we're not supposed to enjoy this, we're not supposed to feel that, quiet it. Allow yourself to move away from that resistance and to embrace that goodness, that God-given gift of love, and fully feel it. Don't let the resistance, which is normal and which is natural, don't let it get in the way. In our last exercise with fantasy, we went to an event. For this exercise, we're going to go to a place, an ashram. Ashram, which is the Hindu Buddhist term for temple. Everybody has an ashram. It is a place that we've experienced in our past. It can be in our home. It can be in our basement. It could be in the next room. It could be just outside the house, in a garden, in your car. It could even be further away, Grand Canyon, Florida. Wherever it is, your ashram is a place that you've experienced in the past that you can access by going back to it. And it is a place where you find incredible peace, calm, stillness, and rejuvenation. And while I'm there, I will notice the wonderful, positive vibrations, the vibes that I'm feeling there. I will take them in. This will become my memorial place, the place I can go to, the ashram. It can also be with a person. It was once said that the people who sat next to St. Francis of Assisi often felt, just by being in his presence, they felt their ashram. They felt a wonderful vibe of calmness, of peace. Go to your ashram so that you can escape the inhospitable now to the past. Then come back. How does it affect where you are now? Go back to your ashram. Experience it, your memorial place. Feel its positive vibe. Feel the effect that it has on you. Your ashram. When Jesus appeared to Mary of Magdalene and told her to go to the disciples and tell them, "Return to Galilee, there you will find me." What was that about? Well, in this exercise, we're going to find out what it is to return to Galilee. Now, you've got to remember that for the disciples, so many of the incredible miracles that they experienced happened in Galilee. The multiplication of the loaves, the miracle of the fish, the raising of the little girl from the dead. These were life-changing, life-altering events that happened for the disciples. So powerful, such a sense of wonder overcame them that their lives were changed forever. During those miracles, they realized, this is an event that I'm willing to lay my life down for. They were incredible revelations. They were epiphanies. So for us, returning to Galilee is returning to something in the past that has happened to us that was life-changing. That was an epiphany that altered our lives indelibly for the rest of time. It might be the birth of a child. It might be a marriage. Everybody has their own Galilee. Return to it and feel the wonder and healing power of that past event. Now, if you remember, Emos was a little town, a little village, 5 miles outside of Jerusalem. And Emos, the road to Emos, was a road the disciples were walking just after the terrible events of Christ's crucifixion. The way to Emos for these 2 disciples was full of sadness, disappointment, remorse, complete and utter despair. And as they traveled those 5 miles, they had nothing to hope for until they met a stranger who we know now was Christ, but they didn't recognize Christ at first. And as they talked to the stranger, they began to feel better and uplifting, a little more positive. And it wasn't later, till that evening, when they broke bread, that they realized that it was Christ. Now, why do we ask ourselves in an exercise like this to go on our way to Emos? It's important for us to look at our own disappointments, at our own failures, our own lost promises, to analyze our perception of our mothers and fathers, of our brothers and sisters, of the way we were brought up, of the events that happened to us, and what we perceive as unacceptable experiences. It's important on our road to Emos that while we walk with Christ, we gain the grace to accept the unacceptable, knowing that it was written that it had to be in order for us to be where we are right now. And through the grace of God, we realize we're all right. It's going to be just fine. Those who accept their destiny will attain the kingdom of God. Travel your road to Emos.